Hi, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. I am so glad to have you today. We are joining today for the Global Disability Side meeting that is working on board towards a safer and inclusive future for girls and young women with disabilities. My name is Shabisile Masinga, and I will be your moderator today. A bit about me is that I am the proud co-founder of the Praying Roses Foundation, which is an organization aimed at promoting sexual reproductive health and rights services for young people with disabilities. And I think this is a key. I think this is why I was chosen as a moderator for today's event, as some of the objectives for today's meeting are to identify key priorities for disability inclusion with the focus on girls and young women in East and Southern Africa towards achieving SDG 5 and the 2030 agenda with the objective to strengthen, protect, and the empowerment of all girls and women with disabilities in the regions. It is also to provide practical examples and share lessons that lead to the increased representation and leadership of girls and young women with disabilities and development humanitarian programs overall. We also aim to explore areas of collaboration between regional UN entities to synergize efforts and maximize the impact in reaching girls and women with disabilities in the Eastern and Southern Africa. These are also the priorities that we at the Pink Roses Foundation and I myself hold deep. As someone who's part of the queer community and the disability community, I've witnessed firsthand, both in working spaces and in personal spaces, how it is to be a young woman in Africa from the marginal groups of the LGBTI community and being a young Black woman. We constantly experience stigmatization in terms of having access to sexual reproductive health rights services, economic empowerment, and so on. As someone who's morally focused, deeply focused on providing sexual reproductive health rights services to young people with disabilities, we often see cases where young people with disabilities can't even access those services, either because their guardians do not allow them or have deemed them to be asexual. Our society has not created spaces where young people with disabilities can feel safe and welcome to access sexual reproductive health services, which is why I think it is important that we are all here today to try and tackle issues and how to come up with solutions, practical, not only just solutions, practical solutions that we as Africans especially can implement in our own areas and make sure that they work towards creating safe and comfortable spaces for all young people with disabilities to live their best lives. Welcome everyone. I hope we have a safe and productive meeting. By safe, I just mean that everyone should be comfortable to be who they are while also respecting everyone else today. Um, just a few housekeeping rules. Your mic will be muted as long as someone is presenting. We will have a Q&A session by the end of the meeting. And yeah, I'd also like to invite all of us to have an open mind and try to walk away here from this moment with a bit of knowledge and a bit of understanding on what you want to do to change, and as you commit to changing young people's lives. We have in the chat box our link to the live session should you wish to share it with any of your other constituents. We also have we also have our links to our hashtag today. So feel free to share and tag us on any social media with regarding to our meeting today and just the Global Disability Summit as a whole. For now, I would like to request our Zoom host to play some videos for us to give us a bit more of an understanding as to why we are here. Welcome again, everyone. Thank you.
Greetings on behalf of the UN Women East and Southern Africa Regional Office. We are so pleased to be part of this important joint side event, collaborating with our sister agencies, UNICEF, UNFPA, UNHCR, and the African Disability Forum in contribution to the Global Disability Summit. We appreciate the valuable perspectives that will be shared during this session and the rich diversity of experiences represented by the speakers coming from across the region. Globally, women and girls with disabilities continue to face multiple layers of discrimination and barriers which prevent them from enjoying their rights to safety, health, education, employment, and participating in political and social life. Individuals living in communities affected by humanitarian crisis face an additional barrier to access their rights. Women with disabilities are at least 2 to 3 times more likely than other women to experience violence, including by family, intimate partners, caregivers, and institutional facilities. The COVID-19 pandemic has intensified this situation and facilitated opportunities for online abuse to grow, making it even more urgent to address the systematic barriers.
Sorry about that. Could you see the video and hear it?
We could only, on my side, I could only hear the video. Uh, I didn't see anything.
Only hear the video. It was not playing. We saw your screen, not the video.
Yeah, we saw the media player screen with the icon.
Can you see the video now?
Yes.
Yes.
What about now?
We can see the video.
Okay.
Okay.
And please, you have to spotlight it.
Greetings on behalf of the UN Women East and Southern Africa Regional Office. We are so pleased to be part of this important joint side event, collaborating with our sister agencies, UNICEF, UNFPA, UNHCR, and the African Disability Forum in contribution to the Global Disability Summit. We appreciate the valuable perspectives that will be shared during this session and the rich diversity of experiences represented by the speakers coming from across the region. Globally, women and girls with disabilities continue to face multiple layers of discrimination and barriers which prevent them from enjoying their rights to safety, health, education, employment, and participating in political and social life. Individuals living in communities affected by humanitarian crisis face an additional barrier to access their rights. Women with disabilities are at least 2 to 3 times more likely than other women to experience violence, including by family, intimate partners, caregivers, and institutional facilities. The COVID-19 pandemic has intensified this situation and facilitated opportunities for online abuse to grow, making it even more urgent to address the systematic barriers that perpetuate the marginalization of women and girls with disabilities in this region. UN Women's mapping of discrimination against women and girls with disabilities and analysis of their experiences during COVID-19 found that despite some progress in legislative and policy measures to protect the rights of persons with disabilities and advance their gender equality, efforts to build back in more inclusive ways have not transformed the underlying inequalities that exist across society. To truly build back better, we must ensure more meaningful representation and leadership of diverse women and girls with disabilities in both development and humanitarian settings. We must work in partnership and join our efforts to leave no one behind. This is the spirit behind today's discussion, and UN Women is committed to keeping this collaboration strong. The messages and stories shared today will highlight some of the entry points and opportunities for disability inclusion and gender equality, and will share reflections on how we can do better for women and girls with disabilities. This can begin by creating more inclusive practices in the virtual and physical spaces where we connect and where decisions are made. Every individual, every organization, every institution has a role to play. There is no excuse for exclusion. UN Women once again appreciates all the partners contributing to today's discussion and looks forward to a fruitful collaboration and conversation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to firstly thank the organizers of this meeting. UNHCR welcomes this opportunity to highlight the challenges confronting displaced women and girls with disabilities and to see how working together we can ensure their protection and inclusion. I also acknowledge the efforts of the UN Regional Interagency Working Group on Disability Inclusion for Eastern and Southern Africa, as well as the African Disabilities Forum. The challenges faced by refugees and IDPs with disabilities are many and include attitudinal, physical and environmental barriers such as restrictive communities, cultural norms, political climate, and assistive and information technology barriers. In all refugee situations, women and girls with disabilities face specific and unique protection challenges, particularly those who have long-term physical, psychosocial, intellectual and sensory impairments. At the 2018 Global Disability Summit in London, UNHCR made 4 commitments. Firstly, to strengthen partnerships. UNHCR has globally strengthened its collaboration with the International Disability Alliance and regionally through the African Disability Forum. We have also joined other UN entities to form the Regional Working Group on Disability Inclusion. Our second commitment is to improve equitable access to education for children with disabilities. This has received considerable attention, and I can report that almost all refugee children with disabilities are financially supported by UNHCR to access education. We will continue to identify and increase these numbers to achieve the 100% target in 2022. Thirdly, to invest in the capacities of persons with disabilities and improve their access to livelihoods. Lastly, to ensure registration systems are improved in identifying and protecting persons with disabilities. UNHCR understands and reaffirms the importance of disability inclusion throughout the displacement cycle, from the emergency influx until such a time that solutions are attainable. One of the most important aspects of supporting and empowering those with disabilities is engaging with them directly to ascertain their views on how they can be supported. This is why I am happy that the Dadaab Response Association, a community-based organization in Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya, will be sharing their challenges and achievements with us here today. UNHCR will continue to call upon governments, donors and other stakeholders to support the capabilities and skills of refugees with disabilities and develop capacity within UNHCR's workforce to better understand how to support persons of concern who have a disability, including training on the needs, rights and capacities of all vulnerable groups. In conclusion, I wish you successful deliberations and look forward to the recommendations emanating from this meeting. Thank you for your attention.
I'm delighted to deliver this keynote remark to you on this special occasion. At least 1/5 of the world female population are girls and women with disability, and they continue to face multiple forms of discrimination and marginalization. For the first time, UN agencies in Eastern and Southern Africa have formed a disability inclusion working group. Our vision for the working group is to break the silo in reaching girls and boys with disability in the region. In this side event to the Global Disability Summit, UN Women, UNFPA, UNHCR, and UNICEF, along with civil society organizations, will share experience and highlight and key intervention area to prioritize and end the multi-dimensional discrimination and exclusion of girls and women with disability, to also ensure protection and to promote the leadership of girls and women with disability. UNICEF has entered this year into a new strategic plan for 2022 to 2025, and we will continue to invest in disability inclusive programming in both development and emergency contexts. Disability inclusion has become an integral part of our work, and we look forward to collaborating with our fellow UN agencies to create a more inclusive society where girls and women with disability can thrive.
Good day. My name is Barnett Njanabanji, Interim Regional Director for UNFPA East and Southern Africa region. Leaving no one behind is central to the vision of UNFPA's new strategic plan 2022 to 2025. The COVID-19 pandemic has amplified the need to promote the rights of persons with disabilities who experience particular and intersecting forms of discrimination, exclusion, and human rights violations. Response and recovery plans must include the needs of women and girls with disabilities. Therefore, we must continue to create platforms and ensure the active participation and leadership opportunities for women and girls with disabilities in decision-making processes. For UNFPA in particular, this means working towards universal access to quality, accessible sexual and reproductive health rights and gender-based violence information and services. We have developed a number of resources to better serve women and girls with disabilities in this regard. This includes the first of its kind Breaking the Silence approach to comprehensive sexuality education for young people with disabilities. We have conducted policy analysis in the region that underscored the urgent need to break the silos between the sexual and reproductive health and rights and disability sectors as they hinder the costed, well-coordinated, multi-sectoral national action required to really make a difference in the lives of women and girls with disabilities. Colleagues, it is clear that we must do better in making essential gender-based violence and sexual and reproductive health and rights services more accessible for persons with disabilities. This means strengthening the capacities of organizations for persons with disabilities on these matters, strengthening the networks and partnerships among stakeholders, as well as documenting and sharing our good practices and lessons learned. Therefore, I commend you for your participation in this event, where it is hoped that a joint agenda for regional collaboration is set, and we look forward to working with all of you in the run-up to Agenda 2030. In solidarity, I thank you all.
I would like to thank the Regional Deputy Director of UN Women, the Regional Director of UNICEF, UNFPA, and UNHCR, respectively, for their commitment and providing us with the keynote remarks to beginning this session. I would also like to thank them for sponsoring this joint event and ensuring that all of us are here today and the plight of making a better world for women and young women with disabilities. For accessibility, I would like to remind everyone that we do have a link on the chat box for transcripts. We also do have a French and English interpreter with us. Sure, there are channels on how to use it on the chat. We also have our sign language interpreter on the that we all can see right now. So what we are about to get into today is, before we get into our panel discussion, I also would like to recommend that anyone who has a question regarding anything that happens today, please feel free to write it on the chat box and we will get to it when we are on our Q&A part of our session. Right now we're about to start our panel discussion. We do have a few panel members who are going to tell us more about what they are doing to making a change within the disability sector in both the continent and the world. I'd like to ask Sunita to tell us more about ending violence against women, who's a policy specialist on ending violence against women and disability focal point person within the UN Women East and Southern Africa. Please take the floor, Sunita.
Thank you so much, Basile. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. To support the identification of lessons that have emerged around inclusivity and also the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic, UN Women East and Southern Africa Regional Office conducted an analysis looking at COVID-19 and women and girls with disabilities. The video that we will be showing now highlights some of the analysis findings, noting the barriers that were faced by women and girls with disabilities, as well as the opportunities that exist for their more meaningful inclusion in the pandemic recovery efforts. We are grateful to have Disability in Kenya, the Network of African Women with Disabilities in Zimbabwe, and the Association of Women with Disabilities in Burundi for sharing their messages in the video. And we hope that the video will give you inspiration of entry points for creating a more inclusive recovery and future for all. Thank you. And the video will now be played.
COVID-19 has had a global impact on all of us, but those most affected are women and girls, particularly those most marginalized in society. Among the women and girls, you have the women and girls living with disability that are even more vulnerable. Their vulnerability comes from discrimination, environmental, policy, and institutional barriers created by individuals and perpetuated across all levels of society.
Women and girls with disabilities had, as much as possible, they had to stay at home, and they had to stay at home all by themselves because people also were worried. Remember that COVID-19 was quite a menace to everyone. And if people knew that for me to be safer, I should maintain the distance, then they wanted to maintain the distance. And they distanced themselves from people who needed them, who needed their support.
Les femmes alors vont en souffrir beaucoup parce que elles vont se retrouver en cas de faiblesse, sans capacité de se prendre en charge. Il y a des personnes qui profitent de ça pour, pour les abuser et les exploiter. Et beaucoup de femmes handicapées, des filles handicapées sont victimes de violences causées par cette négligence. Cette non-intégration, cette non-inclusion des personnes handicapées dans leur société.
People with disability are not often at the decision-making tables. In this pandemic, women and girls with disability have been absent in COVID-19 response and recovery policies, plans, protection and prevention measures. UN Women's regional analysis on trends related to women with disabilities during the pandemic aimed to better understand the realities for women and girls with disabilities and promising practices for their inclusion. It highlighted the importance for their representation across responses and in ensuring inclusive access to information, social protection, livelihoods, opportunities, and public protection measures.
One of the key barriers to effective service delivery for women and girls with disabilities is limited data. Data is important in informing and guiding UN entities, national governments, civil society organizations, and private sector on policy making and enforcement, programming and service delivery to ensure investments are reaching those who need it most. Policies recognizing disability inclusion have been formulated at both national and international level. However, the policy implementation and enforcement processes are slow, hence not much impact has been achieved.
I think each time there is an emergency, let's think of women and girls with disabilities and let's have resources mobilized so that they can also be included. They can be trained, they can be equipped with appropriate gadgets so that they can participate on equal terms with everybody else.
Economic empowerment of women with disabilities need to be part of policy design by governments in response to COVID-19 to support women to generate self-reliant activities and reduce dependencies and create opportunities.
Faire de plus, c'est intervenir et investir dans le domaine du handicap. Ça serait plus utile pour les personnes handicapées en général et les femmes handicapées en particulier.
Now that we heard from various sources on practices and situations of women with disabilities during the COVID-19 time, it is our turn to act. We need to act to improve representation in decision making. We need to act to also improve the inclusivity of the platforms where we address issues of response to COVID-19. To achieve our shared objectives to break the cycle of violence against women and girls, we must first secure the spaces and platforms to hear from and let women and girls with disabilities lead, and will ensure our future efforts leads to a more inclusive and equitable society.
That's it, da. Okay.
Please mute your video. Wow, that was such an informing and exciting video that we just watched today. Right now sorry, that was such an informed video that we just watched. It was really interesting to see that it's not just the serious stuff that we are aiming at tackling when it comes to young people with disabilities, because like usually when people tackle people with disability issues, we just go to the like serious and a bit depressing side of things. So it was really lovely to see a bit of sport involvement, and that energetic video was amazing. Thank you for the information. We look forward to seeing more of the work and commitment that you have shown us today, Sunita. Right now, we are going to have a presentation from UNICEF, who is that's going to show us the contribution that they have towards protection of girls and women with disabilities in the ESARO region. Yeti, I'm not going to try to pronounce your full name again because I know what happened this morning when we were preparing. Yeti is the Disability Inclusion Specialist from UNICEF ESARO Region Office. Please take the stage.
Thank you so much, Khlo Bisile. I'm still daring to pronounce your name, hoping to get better. Hello, everyone, and welcome. And I am Yeti. I hope you can hear me and see me very well, for those of you who can hear and see. As introduced, I'm working with the Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office of UNICEF based in Nairobi, Habari, Jambo, as we say here in Kenya. So I'm happy to share with you the contributions that UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office have done. I have been seeing interesting chats going on in this side event. So we're extremely grateful that the second Global Disability Summit is happening, hosted by the government of Norway, who also happens to be one of our key allies on the disability inclusion front in UNICEF. So discrimination starts as early in quite early age. So in infantship, so it's when the children are born, or even maybe that before they're born, that they face discrimination. An infant born with an impairment faces increased risk of infanticide. They are either denied food, or they're not breastfed properly. There are a lot of taboos, as you know very well. So it just starts quite early in the child's life, and it continues life cycle. Children with disabilities are most likely to be unregistered, but they don't appear in the birth registration. I remember a person telling us how many children you have, and he said, well, they were 5, but I only count the 4 because the 5th one is not productive because of disability. So they tend mostly not to be registered, which leads us to the denial of other services, including education, health, and protection. And children with disabilities experience significantly higher rates of bullying in case they manage to be in the school, or they go out to a shopping place. They have a high rate of being bullied either by their peers as well as service providers. Next slide, please. Children with disabilities also face an increased risk of sexual violence. We know that girls with disabilities are 2.1 times more likely to face discrimination when compared to their non-disabled peers. Children with disabilities are more likely to experience violent disciplining, like when they are expected, they're not encouraged to sign, they are urged, sometimes forced to speak, and if they have autism, they are mostly expected or disciplined very violently to kind of be similar to the other children. Children with disabilities are disproportionately represented in institutional care facilities. Most children with disabilities in Eastern and Southern Africa still are left in institutions, which we are really trying to act on some of this to change this figure. Next slide, please. And we know that it's not all children, but some girls with intellectual or sensory disabilities are at an increased risk of sexual violence. Different disabilities have different types of impairments, have also different levels of vulnerability. And we know that also girls and women with disabilities remain invisible in national policies and programs. Where they talk about children, they are missed, and when they talk about girls, they are missed. Girls with disabilities are missed heavily. In Madagascar, so I would like to share some key points as to how we're trying to change this scenario, okay? So in Madagascar, UNICEF is training child protection service providers, including the police, the child helpline, and the NGOs managing the child care institutions or daycare centers in disability inclusive child protection. And we also do in Rwanda, building the capacity of child protection professionals to train and support the community-based volunteers on how to engage parents or on care and nurturing of the children with disabilities and supporting their inclusion in the community. And in Rwanda, by the way, we are so proud we have achieved to get so many children with disabilities out of institutions and get alternative family and community-based care. And our Rwandan colleagues have a lot to share. If you're interested, you can go to their website. In Kenya, UNICEF is also supporting the civil registration of children with disabilities in institutional care. Sorry, enhancing capacity in child protection and social workers, and supporting the reintegration of children with disabilities so they grow up with their families. The same efforts we are doing. We're supporting the policy, but we're also building the capacity of the service providers in government. In Mozambique, UNICEF is also collecting data. And in Zambia, together with UNFPA, UNICEF is implementing the global program to end child marriage in 2 districts, supporting the adolescents with life skills, equipping teachers sorry, with knowledge. And now I will ask for the host to play the video on our experience in Zambia. Thank you.
Here, it was learned that the school dropouts due to pregnancies were common until about 4 years ago, when support for ending child marriage interventions kicked in and numbers have since reduced. The first wave of COVID-19, however, where children had to stay home for about 5 months, showed how vulnerable children living with disabilities are after one of them became pregnant during that period. Melody Kabwebwe is a deputy head teacher and explains.
So that is just the school policy that when they come in being a boarding school, we pick out the girls who are big and do the medical checkup. And we knew that the period they were away was too long. We appreciate efforts that is coming from government and the NGOs. It is really something that we are proud of as special teachers, as a special school, because we know that we are not left behind, and we sing that song to our pupils that they should not be left behind. So we are there. Even those that have dropped out, we can still recall them, they can still come. Some it's due to financial challenges, knowing that this is a boarding school. They have to have all the requirements, and most of these children come from vulnerable homes. Parents, when they just drop at grade 9, when the child fails 2 or 3 subjects, you know, in a family they always select. It used to be boys, but in this case, where there are children with disabilities, the parents will prefer to support a child who is the so-called normal and leave out the child who has a disability. So those who have dropped out in terms of girls' education are those that have not made it to grade 10 and the parents could not afford to bring them back. And the case of the child who fell pregnant during the COVID period, she's in school because the parents are aware now that the children should be in school.
The multi-sectored approach towards the fight against early child marriage has yielded positive results across the board, a development which makes the Sananga Education Board very pleased. Mulonda Katukula is the board secretary.
We have actually recorded a total of 178 pupils that have actually returned to school. So out of this 178, we have 11 learners that were actually returned as a result of early marriages. So from the 11, we have 1 boy and 10 girls. There is actually a decline in the number of teenage pregnancies and early marriages that we're actually experiencing as a district. For the 3 UNICEF supported wards. This is where we had 5 cases of early marriages and 17 of pregnancies. Comparatively, for 2019, the figure was 85, but then this shot to 114 because of the close to 6 months that our learners were not in school. The assistance that we've got from UNICEF and other partners has actually really assisted in the sense that our communities are now more aware of these issues of early marriages and teenage pregnancies. Even the learners themselves are now aware of the dangers.
The Sananga District Administration is hoping that the program can be widened to cover other wards in the district.
The other 9 wards are not captured. I wish it could be rolled to the other wards also, so that each school becomes part and parcel of what is happening now. Parents are starting to understand that door is not as important as education. Let the girl be educated, because there'll be more benefits when a girl is educated than when she gets married.
Thank you so much, Yeti, for that very informative presentation and video. It's interesting to actually note that like something that is as devastating as COVID is also the reason that we are here today. It's helped highlights the many challenges that young people with disabilities face on a daily basis. This isn't to say that there haven't been organizations who've been working towards changing lives for young people with disabilities, but I think we low-key have to thank COVID for making sure that everyone has joined and united in the plight to bettering the lives of young people with disabilities. Another point that actually like made me laugh a little bit when I was hearing your presentation. It wasn't a funny point. Don't think that I think infanticide and just hiding young people with disabilities or children with disabilities is a funny thing. But there's a joke that we usually do have in our organization, like with our executive committee in the Pink Roses Foundation that we have. When people ask me why I chose to create the Pink Roses Foundation, and we usually say I was just working to create a generation of mini-me's, because like you better try and hide me or just like try and bully me just for being me and see what happens. So now we're going to have yet another informed presentation from the UNFPA, and I look at this person as a mother at this point, Maria Pacaraudis, who is within the UNFPA, does comprehensive sexuality education and disability for the ESARO region. I'd like to also remind, before Maria takes over, I'd like to remind everyone that we will be sharing the recording and all the presentations with everyone who is here today. When you registered, you shared your email with us, so we have all the means to be able to share all the materials that we are using and just the overall meeting. Please take it away, Maria.
Thank you so much, Clobesile, and welcome all participants. We're so happy to be here together today to share our joint UN experiences on how we can increase inclusion among women and girls, and by extension, young people with disabilities in our region. So my presentation is I'm gonna speak very fast. Apologies in advance to the interpreters, but to talk about access to sexual and reproductive health and rights services and GBV information and services. Being UNFPA, that's our mandate. So when you look at the concerns and what we're actually facing here, at the center of this slide, you see we talk about exclusion of persons with disabilities. I mean, that's at the root of it all. And then if you look at the endemic levels of violence, sexual violence, and all the negative sexual reproductive health outcomes, whether it's HIV rates, teen pregnancy, et cetera. And we know that there's a pattern that there's increased vulnerability to poverty among families that have disabled persons within them. And that sometimes leads to, harmful practices like the child marriage we heard from UNICEF's video, transactional sex, exploitation, et cetera. And then we've heard from Claude Basile already about the cultural misconceptions about the sexuality of persons with disabilities, that they should either be considered asexual, or in some cases, people may believe that they're oversexed, hypersexual. And that's not really the case. We have a wide range of sexualities among disabled persons as we do in the general population. And then some of our previous presenters talked about the data challenges. So in all our respective specialty areas, the underreporting, the poor quality of data, the incomparability of data, the lack of data disaggregation or outdated and non-existent data is a huge challenge that we must overcome collectively, because that really, we need the numbers to support the work, and with the numbers comes the resources. And then, of course, we did a policy analysis, as our regional director mentioned in his opening video, that shows how the siloed approach to our sectors are also not helping us move ahead more efficiently. The disability sector policies at national level are really about providing reasonable accommodation, more about economic independence and things like that, and really don't speak about sexual reproductive health and rights. And then if you look at the SRHR policies, they do mention disability here and there, but not enough, not where we have targeted funding for it. So we know that's a major thing to work on. And then we know that all the professionals that are working in these spaces lack the capacity, whether they're health workers, whether they're teachers doing sexuality education, whether their parents even need a whole lot of support, and other carers and social workers. So we need to build those capacities. And then, of course, my area of expertise, access to comprehensive sexuality education to prevent and mitigate all of these sexual reproductive health concerns. And then the lack of services. Dave, to the next slide. And when we talk about lack of services, we're talking about not only getting to them, but making sure that the communication, all the commodities are according to the type of disability. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over each and every slide, but here is an example of in Ethiopia where 50% of young people surveyed really didn't even think they could access them, that they were available to them. And then in Uganda, young people never using a form of contraception. And we know that there's a lot of medical procedures that are happening without informed consent, like forced abortions or sterilizations, disrespectful treatment in health facilities. And the interesting bidirectionality between disability and HIV, for example, you can become disabled because of HIV, or if you're HIV can cause disability. Did I say that right? Yeah, but they both work both ways. And the same is the case for obstetric fistula. If you're disabled, you may be more prone to it. And on the flip side, it can cause disability, fistula. Okay, next slide. I must quickly go through. Next slide, please. I'm not going to talk about this, just to say, yeah, but when we look at young people in particular, we know that young people want families. They want information. They want to have healthy relationships just like anyone else. We know that the parents and carers are also stigmatized and need support. And we know that young people can be agents of change. Next slide, please. Okay, so we developed a number of tools, and again, in the interest of time, situational analysis, case studies, policy analysis with a policy analysis tool that you may be able to apply in your own country. And a lot regional and global strategic guidance on how to do better programming. And we also have an out-of-school guidance that speaks on how to engage young people with disabilities specifically. Next. Okay, I'm running out of time. Next slide, quick. Okay, that's what the guidance documents look like. They'll be shared with the links, go ahead. And then next slide, please. What we know is that we need to do the twin track approach. That means mainstream and targeted programming. We also know that when in doubt, ask that person with a disability on how we can better include them, okay? We have to be sensitive and check in. Next slide. I wish I could do a presentation just on comprehensive sexuality education, but what I wanna say quickly is that we cannot only rely on CSE in schools, we have to look at CSE out of schools, because more than half of young people out of schools, more young people with disabilities tend to be out of schools. So we must reach them there. And we need to do a lot of training. Next. I'm bringing it home. Go ahead. So these are what our resources look like. We have the Breaking the Silence approach to CSE, which has adaptations per disability type, which is very new and interesting. And so we have those, and we're rolling them out in several countries. Next. And it's using universal design and reasonable accommodations. And then our global program did an assessment during COVID and a number of great resources for all of you to use on good practices, checklists on how we're doing in terms of SRHR and GBV and knowing your rights. Next. Okay, and then really in terms of next steps, we'll talk about it all together, but we really need to work on all the advocacy, all the costing, strengthening our partnerships, and especially building the capacities of organizations for persons with disabilities. And we thank you all. These are some of our partners in this work, and I'm gonna end there. Over.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was so brief. Yeah, and very informative. Thank you so much for all the work that you are doing. We are running a bit behind schedule. The meeting will proceed 15 minutes longer than it was supposed to end. I hope everyone can accept our apologies. Then we are going to move swiftly along to a presentation by UN High Commissioner for Refugees. It's going to be done by Amino and Sonia. Amimo is from the Forum of Organizations of Persons with Disabilities in Mozambique, and Sonia is a community-based protection associate of UNHCR. Thank you.
Muito obrigado. Eu não sou bom em inglês, mas só passei para vos cumprimentar. Meu nome é Amil Magna. Estou a trabalhar para o FAMOD, que é o Fórum das Associações das Pessoas com Deficiência em Moçambique. E trabalhamos juntamente com a CUNUR em várias atividades. Assim dou a palavra à colega Sônia, que é a nossa mentora de inglês a nível de Moçambique. Obrigado.
Good morning, colleague. So Amimo was presenting itself, saying that he is a member of FAMOD, and he was also giving the floor for myself to do the presentation. So we are here to share with you the best practice on inclusion of women and girls with disability in Cabo Delgado. So in terms of, next slide, please. In terms of humanitarian situation, some 745,000 persons were displaced in northern Mozambique, mostly Cabo Delgado, due to insecurity fostered by non-state armed groups. Out of all people displaced, and based on frequent protection monitoring exercise, UNHCR estimates that around 50% are living with some sort of disability. Moreover, out of people with specific needs, over 50% have a disability. First, we would like to share with you the challenges on disability inclusion in an emergency setting faced by people with disability, particularly girls and women with disability. We have lack of equitable access to quality education for displaced children with disability, particularly affecting girls. We have lack of investment on capacities of persons with disability and improving their access to livelihood opportunities, particularly affecting women. We have lack of resources and funds to prioritize disability inclusive humanitarian action and strengthen disaggregated data and information management by disability, gender, and age in data collection and statistics. Next slide, please. In addition, we do have best practice in disability inclusion in Cabo Delgado, where regarding the coordination and advocacy, UNHCR and FAMOD are co-leading the Disability Working Group in Cabo Delgado that will implement a very inclusive 2022 work plan. And we advocate for the inclusion of people with disability in humanitarian programs and in decision-making at community level. We advocate for people with disability equality accessing assistance and service while targeting the most vulnerable to barriers. We advocate for disaggregated data by disability, gender, and age in data collection and statistics by organization and agencies. We do capacity building on disability inclusion to disability working group members, clusters, working groups, and OPD in coordination with humanitarian inclusion. Also, UNHCR in partnership with humanitarian inclusion donate computer equipment to FAMOD. Next slide, please. Furthermore, we do attribution of assistance service with a focus on age and gender, have assisted 250 people with disability, which of 74 are women and 12 are girls. We do always awareness raising on rights of persons with disabilities in the community, and we enhancing inclusion of youth with disability in community leadership and with youth groups. Next slide, please. In conclusion, going forward, UNHCR and FAMOD would like to do much more with displaced persons with physical, hearing, visual, intellectual, psychosocial disabilities, and focus on the physical, information, communication, organizational, and attitudinal barriers that needs to be removed for all persons with disability to participate in the community and enjoy equal rights. Thank you. I will open my video. I don't know if you can see me, just to say hi.
Thank you, Sonia and Amimo. Unfortunately, we couldn't see your video, but hopefully we'll see you later on the Q&A session. Thank you for that informative presentation on all the good work that you guys are doing in Mozambique. Now I would like to call upon a present um a presentation from the project officer of African Disability Forum on increasing leadership and representation of young women with disabilities through capacity building in the continent. And also, can you please help me with your name?
All right, thank you, Hilo Bisili. My name is Frehiwot Siyum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I am from African Disability Forum, ADF. ADF is a continental membership organization of organizations of persons with disabilities in Africa. And ADF seeks to strengthen and unify representative voices of persons with disabilities and their families, as well as their organizations in Africa. We are honored to be part of this very important conversation on creating a safer and inclusive future for women and girls with disabilities in the region. The inclusion of women and girls with disabilities, both in development and humanitarian setting, can only be realized with their meaningful participation and consultation, because nothing about us without us. However, this is what we are missing from development and humanitarian organizations. Women and girls with disabilities are not consulted in their program designing, implementation, as well as in their evaluation process, or it's not enough, or it's not meaningful. Building the capacities of women and girls with disabilities is key to facilitate their advocacy efforts, and also to take space and claim their rights for their meaningful participation and consultation in development and humanitarian setting. So this is that's the reality. So it's in this context that the African Disability Forum is starting a new and pilot program called Young African Women with Disabilities Leadership Program. It is an 8-month intensive leadership mentoring and coaching program, and it aims to build their leadership capacity, build their confidence, and increase their representation at national, continental, and international level, and to claim their rights. And intersectionality is at the center of this pilot program, because young women with disabilities are also refugees. They are from indigenous communities. They are also from rural areas. There are also young women with disabilities who are the most marginalized, such as women with intellectual disabilities, women with psychosocial disabilities. So our program is aiming to have all the diverse groups of young women with disabilities with their all intersectional approach. We received over 600 applications for this for the first cohort, only from English speaking African countries. However, we have limited resources to accommodate a high number of participants in the first cohort. So with the first cohort, we aim to reach 16 participants, and it's only for the first cohort would be only for English-speaking African countries, and the program would start in April 2022, and it's going to be a hybrid program to be held both in person and virtual, with all the necessary support to make sure that it is accessible and inclusive. So this is what we would like to share with you all today. And we welcome all interested stakeholders to collaborate with us with this pilot program, so that we ensure the meaningful participation and consultation of young women with disabilities, with all their diversities, by building their leadership capacities and increasing their representation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Hilo Bisili.
Thank you, Faust. Looking forward to the program, to seeing what the program comes up with in April. Hopefully, I'll be there. Speaking of great interventions when it comes to leadership of young women in the disability sector, I'd like to call upon Chikonde, who is currently working in a Malawi Interfaith AIDS Association. She serves there as a member of the Association for People with Albinism, to tell us about her work and what she's done to promote the inclusion of young women with disabilities in Malawi.
Thank you so much. As we know, girls and young women with disabilities face discrimination from a very young age, just like Yeti said earlier. Um, so they are, in fact, most discriminated against than boys with disabilities, and there are a lot of barriers that affect their inclusion in participation in leadership and other platforms. So some of the barriers include negative attitudes, stigma, and also the issue of accessibility, where our the environment is not conducive, especially in schools and in other areas, in other aspects of life as well. Girls and young women with disabilities share the same rights and aspirations as everyone, and it is and therefore they also have the power to shape a sustainable future for all, which is why we need to make them visible. um I was made visible in 2019 when I became the Miss Albinism Malawi, where I believe that because I was made visible, I have managed to be seen, and also people have been able to see the work that I do. And basically, what I do is to encourage young girls with disabilities, helping them to have the confidence, building capacity in them, to help them know that they can lead as well, just like anyone else. Um, I have also worked with a number of organizations representing young women with girls with disabilities. I've been also called to attend different national events just to represent young girls with disabilities. I also recently became the National Youth Champion for Gender Equality for an organization that advances gender equality called Her Liberty. And this has really helped me to know that I have the potential to lead. And I know that other young girls with disabilities, when they look at me, they also are encouraged and they're inspired that they can also lead. And it is really important for us as different stakeholders to try to make these girls visible. And as everyone has already said, we have to strengthen our partnerships, and also just try to we should also just try to like give young girls a platform, where they young girls with disabilities a platform. For example, there are young girls with disabilities that have initiatives. We need to support that, and also ensure that young girls have access to quality education, and they're going to school, because most girls do not really have the platform. They do not go to school because maybe of poverty. So we need to support their education, and also support them in everything. All I'm saying, I guess, is that young girls with disabilities need to be made visible. They need a voice. We should ensure that we give them a voice and a platform if we want them to be included in leadership. And we should also support young girls with disabilities with education, by making our infrastructures and environments accessible and conducive to all. And in that way, we're going to ensure that young girls we're going to see that young girls with disabilities actually do have the potential in shaping a sustainable future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chikondi, for showing us what you are doing to represent young people with disabilities in Malawi. I always like to say that, yeah, us young people with albinism already have the spotlight on us when it comes to reaching people, and it's up to us to use it to make positive impacts and changes in the world. And it's nice to see that you're using your spotlight well. Now I'd like to call upon Mark Nzano from UNHCR to introduce, to share with us the good practices and success stories of more inclusion of young people with disabilities in humanitarian settings, specifically in Kenya.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Nyamoch from the DAB camp. Ms. Nyamoch is part of a community-based organization involved in advocacy for persons with disabilities in the camp. So I will hand the floor to Ms. Nyamoch for her presentation. Kindly unmute Paulo Gunde on the list.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm here to speak on behalf of the DAB Response Association. Our area of focus is protection. Next, our area of focus, protection and inclusion of persons with disabilities, advocacy and awareness on current emergency protection issue affecting and well-being of persons with disability, including children. Education support through research, training, provision of educational material and mentorship program. Next, please. Our partners, Humanity and Inclusion, Window, International Kenya, Borderless High Education for Refugees, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Refugee Affairs Secretariat. Next, please. Our intervention for persons with disabilities, awareness creation, community mobilization, livelihood training, guidance and counseling, fair-to-fair mentorship to adolescents, boys and girls, support group to care given of children with disabilities and teenage mothers. Next, please. Achievement and success: conducted community mobilization reaching 3,000 during awareness creation and on stigma and discrimination. Facilitated linkage of sick female caregiving for livelihood training on vocational skill. Ongoing one-on-one guidance and counseling section to 90. Conducting fair-to-fair mentorship to 60 community members. Next, please. Challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic negative impacted on the implementation of the activity within the community. The announcements on camp closure caused much fear to the refugees on their whereabouts, which is still unknown. Harsh climate condition, especially the drought affected many families and livestock in the community, leading social, economic, and emotional challenge. Minimum participation of persons with disabilities in community activities due to stigma and discrimination as a result of culture, perception, and attitudinal barriers. Next. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It's really lovely to see all the beautiful things that are happening within our continent. We have come almost towards the end of our session today. I hope everyone has gained a bit more knowledge on what is happening in aiding young people with disabilities live much better lives within the continent, sorry. Now it's time for the question and answer session, which will be moderated by Crystal, who's the UNICEF Disability Inclusion Officer in the ESARO region. Um, please take the the virtual floor, Crystal.
Thank you so much, Rabisela. I hope you can hear me well. Can you confirm?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, participants, for keeping with us, although we are a little bit behind schedule. So we will have a very short Q&A session. I have noted a couple of questions. I think I will pick up two of them. So the first question is from Tina Rubao. She's asking if we have any advice to her. She is working for an organization, which is an Indigenous Activist Fund. And she's asking for advice on how her organization can engage more with communities of women with disabilities, particularly from sexual and gender minorities. If anyone wants to pick up that question, perhaps Maria from UNFPA.
Sure. Sorry, my sound wasn't good. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question is if you have any advice on how Tina's organization, an Indigenous Activist Fund, can engage more with communities of women with disabilities, especially from sexual and gender minorities.
Yes, I mean, that brings in all the intersectionality and the increased vulnerabilities. So we have an international guidance, a programmatic and technical guidance on out-of-school CSC that actually has sections in it on how to engage with those left behind groups of young people, disabled, indigenous, LGBTQI, you know, there's all different sections. So we do have some guidance to share. I mean, of course, there's a lot of local advocacy that needs to take place, and I think it's very locally based solutions in this case, and getting trained and things like that. We can take that bilaterally as well in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I will pick up another question from Restituta Kang. Sorry if I mispronounced that. She's asking if we have advice on how to ensure safety of girls and women who want to be involved in all leadership committees.
Maybe I can come in.
Yes. Sir.
Thank you. Yeah, this is an important piece of work, and I really appreciate the person who posed the question. We are working with the Southern Africa Federation of the Disabled, an umbrella organization of persons with disabilities, to encourage that all the OPDs who are members of this sub-regional umbrella have a safeguarding policy. And since UNICEF's focus is child safeguarding, we are focusing on children, but this safeguarding measures and policies, as well as grievance complaining mechanisms, need to be in place in all the places. So safety is an important part of work, and we hope to see especially organizations of persons with disabilities will be gradually working on to put those safeguarding policies, but not only policies, but also measures in place. So you are absolutely right. And also as a woman with a disability, my experience is that many women with disabilities face vulnerabilities, violences, so they kind of tend to remain or to kind of not to be part of that. So it's an important piece of work that is common to all of us. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yeti. I think that also speaks to one of the other questions in the chat on how to break silos between the disability inclusion sector and safeguarding. I believe now we can, in the interest of time, we can move on to the wrap up. And that will be from Yeti Molla from UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office. Over.
Thank you, Priscilla, and thank you everyone for your patience in really staying, as well as also in actively participating. I would like to thank all the UN entities, as well as the speakers, the presenters, our excellent, fantastic moderator. I think I would like to leave you with 3 C's today. The first one is, of course, coordination. As UN entities, we really want to coordinate our efforts better. And as was indicated, we really want to walk the walk and kind of get less on the talk, as we have now so many interesting frameworks to build on, as you have heard. So the first is the coordination piece, which these agencies that have come today to present for you will be working together to really break the silos and synergize whatever we have resources. So the Interagency Disability Inclusion Working Group is an infant one. So if you give us a thumbs up, I think we can do a miracle. And I would like really to thank all the UN entity focal persons to make this a reality, because we started late and so on. So the first is coordination. So all the things that we want to do, we really want it coordinated, and we want to deliver as one UN. Second is, of course, collaboration. UN is great, but and important that we collaborate, but we need to collaborate also with civil society organizations, including organizations of persons with disabilities. So please reach out to UN entities. We have the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, which demands all UN entities need to become inclusive of and accessible to persons with disabilities. So collaboration is the second piece I want to leave with you. But for collaboration, don't only expect us, come to us, knock our door, demand us, hold us accountable. The last piece is, of course, communication, the last C. We would like to inform you that we will be communicating, we will be working on an outcome document of this side event that we had today, and we will be sharing the recording along with that outcome document. And the outcome document will also be given back to our respective regional directors for their respective actions towards making our UN entities work more inclusive. I would like to conclude by saying that the Global Disability Summit is a great opportunity that we really want to make more commitments to change, and we want to be bold enough to demand and hold our governments as well as UN entities accountability in terms of their disability inclusion work. Thank you, everyone, and this brings us to the end of the side event today. I wish you a great day, and also wish you a very productive participation in the rest Global Disability Summit events. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye and have a wonderful day.